Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us at another one of our APPI Learn by Doing webinars. As always, there's some focused subject, and today is a very interesting and I believe extremely important one for getting a good feeling about how indeed each of us is a self-programming quantum computer. And I really want to put that into a context so that you can feel really good about it. This is actually an extremely good thing, I believe. Um, so let's do that. We will start with ARV discussion for newbies. We usually have newbies that are either here or will listen to this, so I do want to go over ARV. And then we will get into the fact that you are a self-programming quantum mechanical computer. Um, hey, that's how you do precognition. If you weren't quantum mechanical, you would have a hard time doing precognition. And then we will do a feedback session for the coordinate 305125. We will not be doing a new prediction. There's just not going to be enough time because I really want to get into this. I think it's important, and I hope you'll find it rather interesting. We'll be talking non-technical. Um, let's begin with ARV. So this is a linear time discussion of the protocol, and it begins with what is really a classical remote viewing session. You'll be giving a task. This is when you view the target that you will see or experience during your feedback session, which will be in the future. So this is precognitive remote viewing. Now, remote viewing shows that consciousness has access to information from distant places, and by distant we include, of course, space, and our focus is on time. Now, your tasking, the remote viewing tasking, is going to be describe and sketch your feedback target, which will come in the future. And during the feedback session, that's when you see, experience, put a lot of energy into what that target is. And we'll be talking more about photo sites because we have picture targets, but they're much more than pictures. Now, in between these two times, because you want to make use of this, and this is where the association comes in, you want to make use of your session describing, predicting the future. So this is when you make, and I call it an action judgment. You do analysis, you make a following, a judgment based on your analysis, and what you're going to be doing. We do binary ARV. So here's where you predict the answer basically to a yes/no question. We call it over/under sometimes. Will the sports event have over 7.5 points if it's, say, a baseball game? And that's a yes or no. We'll call it over/under. But they're all binary. Now, once you appreciate that we're asking a question which can go only one of two ways, we now make the association with two possible targets. One target's associated with yes. The other target, guess what, is associated with no. The actual target will always be the one that happens. The actual target. See, these are possible targets. The actual target shown during the feedback session will always be associated with the actual yes or no. So over here, you will see the target associated with yes or no. So as a judge, if you come up with a strong rating, you say, oh my gosh, this person really did a good job on the target associated with yes, hey, the assumption is that they did a good description, and you're going to then take action on yes if you choose to take action, but you certainly can. That's ARV, okay, in linear time. You make your judgment here based on a good solution, a good match to one of these two targets, knowing you're going to see the correct one at feedback time. Now, sometimes you pass. Hey, we don't always get really good information. Not even the best viewers get good information all the time. So if there isn't a good match to either one of these, you simply pass. So that indeed is a third choice. You can go with yes, no, or pass. Now, let's look at this in a broader perspective, which is the fact that we are doing precognition. Your tasking is to describe and sketch what you're going to see in the future. And if you begin to think about this a little bit and meditate on it, you'll really begin to appreciate that time is not anything like we usually consider it to be. That linear time model is really not accurate. We are purposefully now taking on this precognition, and in a very real sense, when you realize that you're looking at time differently, it's almost like you're outside of space and time because you're able to look at the future, experience the future. This whole process of associative remote viewing begins with the feedback session, because that's when you know the truth. That's when you get to see the target. You can interact with it. You can light it up for your remote viewing session. And so this is the mindset which I'd like all of you to have. Precognition begins with the feedback session. Your cue, as I indicated, will be very simply describe and sketch your, and we use a 6-digit number, some people use letter, some people put in a date. This is a tag, if you will, a coordinate in the sense of leading you to, in fact, some people, Skip Atwater once called it like a telephone number, because it is connected to the feedback target that you see during your feedback session. That is the purpose of this, to link to the feedback target. Now, emphasizing the feedback target now is a photo site. There have been lots of different ways of doing ARV. Sometimes you can use objects. Sometimes you can go out to a physical site. We use, for many practical reasons, photo sites. Now let me tell you what a photo site is. A photo site refers to a particular location. So the word site means a particular location at the particular time the photo was taken. So here you've got the photo site now. Consciousness, naturally, but we make this part of the protocol, is expected to move, so you kind of move your consciousness to that particular site when the photo was taken. And you do this naturally when you look at a photograph. You know, you look at a photograph of a friend and you sort of remember when it was taken, and oh yeah, oh he's smiling, oh look, he's moving around there. You know, your consciousness goes naturally to that. Okay, so you're going there. But there's one other aspect which is very important here. Your job is to describe and or sketch what can be readily verified or inferred from the photo. Remember this judging stage? We want you to give information which can be readily verified. If there's something out of the frame of the picture, that's not going to do us any good as a judge, because all I have to use as the judging is this photo site picture. So, but you know, you can, the picture doesn't have sounds in it, for example. If it's a picture of a football game, you know what? You know there's going to be noise around. If it's a picture of, hey, a waterfall, you're going to know there's going to be um, noise around. You also know, for example, that the water is falling, so there's motion, even though it is a snapshot. So that's what we mean by readily verified or inferred from the photo. Um, Now, what do these things include? Um, there's this first impression gestalt. When you first look at this, uh, what we see over and over and over and over again, but not 100% of the time, but often, um, and some of the classical remote viewing training classes, like CRV, first thing you do is you get kind of a big picture first impression gestalt. Hey, if this were the picture, you might get water. You might get three. You might get interface. You know, you might even get boat or something of that sort. The kind of thing you would get if you took just a really quick look at it. So that's what I mean by first impression gestalt. And then, of course, visuals, the colors, the shapes, the dimensions. Is it real big, real small? And that usually means compared to you, your size. Um, Sounds, smells, tastes. The consciousness uses all, all of your normal physical senses. The information is coming in through your body and your nervous system. All of your senses are activated when you're doing this remote viewing. It's kind of wonderful, actually. Um, and so you can use all of that to describe and sketch the feedback photo site target. Now, the judging, as we've indicated, involves the two possible feedback targets. I'm emphasizing again that what goes on during judging has nothing to do with what the target is in terms of the remote viewer. The judge is making a decision on, okay, which one of these did the remote viewer describe? So he looks at two. The focus for the remote viewer is just on the feedback target. Now, we do self-judging. A lot of people. We have independent people who do independent judging as well. And there are pros and cons for both. I believe everybody could learn how to do both if they wanted to. It's a matter of personal preference and also ease. Some people have a hard time finding an independent judge. Um, but frankly, I believe there's a lot in sessions which make self-judging an advantage. Personal choice. While independent or self-judging is going on, we keep a very intellectual mindset to not light up both pictures, to not entangle both pictures, so that during the remote viewing session, you jump over this and everything else going on in your day, and you just describe and sketch the target. So the idea, frankly, is very straightforward once you can get over, and some people have trouble with this, getting over the fact that, in fact, you can pick up information from the future. So the protocol then, once you get over that, is very straightforward. Now, we do like this sub-Q because of um, the judging phase, and that is to always emphasize aspects of the target that are different from the decoy possible target. I put this out here, it may be controversial, but I've done it now because whether we like it or not, we have so many people who describe both of the targets. And that's true with independent judging as well as self-judging. So why not, as a remote viewer, tell your subconscious, hey, I know you're powerful enough, strong enough to look at both if you wanted to, and even if you do, that's okay, but don't give me that information. Only give me the information on the actual target and even those features which are very different from the decoy. So that's kind of an interesting subtlety here because we're accepting the fact that you have access to both. Um, and then again, notice the whole key is to connect these two, the remote viewing session and the feedback session. That's ARV. If there are any newbies here or questions, ask away. Okay, so now let's go into, oh wait, I did want to do one other thing here, sorry. I just wanted to show for the newbies the way the interaction is with the internet. And it all starts with email. And this might be the kind of thing, this is a particular group, we have lots of groups, and it indicates the event, sometimes in general, sometimes more specifically. It gives the due date, and then there's always a link. You click on this link, and that indeed will take you online where you'll get your coordinates, and you do your transcript, and then you go to judging, and there's a link on that page, or you send it off to your independent judge, who then does the judging for you, and then submits the judging, which are done in terms of confidence rankings. You get a 0 to 7, and we'll be talking about that when we do our example, but you will get a personal prediction. Okay, when you finish doing the judging, your judge can send it to you, or you will get it directly. And in this case, it'll tell you which way you went, so that you, in fact, if you choose to, wager and wager wisely, because you will now know how you predicted. But also, we will send via email a group prediction. And notice in this case, the personal one was under, but the group might be over, because the group manager, might have 10 submissions, and if most of them went in this direction, or for whatever other reason he thought they were real strong ones, the group manager makes this prediction. So you get both of those. Again, these come in via email, but all the work is done on the server. And then this is the most important. This is where it begins. You get your feedback in an email after the event. So first you got the prediction, the event goes off, then you get your feedback. And then, of course, there's a link here you click on, and you will get the picture with the coordinate right there. Okay, let's now talk about quantum computers. And I decided to just start this to try to get all of you, this includes me, to really recognize that we are really right at the beginning of what is going to be a major impact on our society. As big as the internet itself, the internet allows us to feel so close to each other. We, I think, all know how the internet sort of seemed to almost come out of nowhere on a measure of, a decade unit. And here we are with the internet. Well, quantum computers is going to be at least as big as that. And here's words from Forbes. Quantum computers, how quantum computers, there wrote an article on this, will revolutionize artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence is getting all kinds of press now because it's very important. We're making all kinds of artificial intelligent things. I mean, robots. We're now putting artificial intelligence in cars that are going to drive themselves. Artificial intelligence is a biggie. Machine learning, so that's teaching machines how to do things better and better, and then how to organize, manipulate, look at, get information from big data. One thing that we have right now in our society is really more data than we know what to do with. And quantum computers are going to be able to help, I believe, with that. Okay, so we're really talking about an important and relevant subject in general, but I'm going to want to relate it now to you, to us as human beings. And I want to start with something which seems off the subject, but it's not. And that is, this was from a Scientific American article, a very well-respected magazine that's somewhere between the very, very high level, but they try to put it into language that you can understand. And here's the statement: black hole computers. So I want us to understand what I mean by computers. Now, this is one where Stephen Hawking was wrong. Matter goes in, answers go out. Most of us, I think, can remember, and I certainly can, when I was in my physics classes, even back at in college, they were teaching that anything that got sucked into a black hole was gone, and there was nothing that came out. And that was something Stephen Hawking was supportive of for a very long time. They've now done experiments, and indeed, anything that goes in, there's a signal that comes out. There is no boundaries to the universe. Even black holes are not a kind of boundary. There's interchange both ways. There's entanglement both ways. Here's a definition of a computer. Notice I use the word computer here, okay? One that computes. A programmable, usually electronic, but doesn't have to be, that can store, retrieve, and process data. So you use computers for lots of things. This black hole is a computer. Something came in, okay? We don't know what happened inside, but some sort of invisible program gave an output. So there's an input, there's an output, it processes data, gives you results. Well, now I want to get into the fact that that's what you do. But you're much more than a standard electronic device because you're a computer living being. In the context of our world, China seems to be doing some things which are actually a bit ahead of us, at least from what you can read in the unclassified literature. And notice the words they're using here are quantum information over several kilometers. So this turns out to show that it's information transfer. Here they're talking about it over space. We do precognition over time. Doesn't matter. It turns out the Chinese also now have made communication with a satellite. So that just came out very recently. Here's a quote from various articles to try to put some of this in context. And this is from Bill Gates. The one part of Microsoft where they put up slides that I truly do not understand, and that was Bill Gates on quantum computing. And even scientists will tell you that the intellect just doesn't get its head around it completely, yet it's real, it works. Superposition and entanglement. I am going to introduce those words because they're relevant to what we do, and so I want you to understand them. Now, these are the two core quantum properties that we're trying to use for, quote, computation when we do our precognition, for example. Superposition is the phenomenon where a particle or information, you see the physicists always they're still back at particles, things that they can do that way. We know that the same thing happens with information, where information exists in all possible states at once. There's a bundle of probabilities. Notice even here in quantum mechanics, at the stage they're talking about here, they're looking like forward in time. So it's like there can be more than one answer, and they're like both out there. That's what quantum superposition says. I'm going to say a little bit more about that. And then quantum entanglement is the other key issue. And here, these are quotes. It means that intertwined particles, say like two photons, or say like information, are inextricably related to each other, so that you cannot change one without the other changing as well. So even if particles are on the opposite ends of the universe, or interacted over different times. So you tweak one photon and instantly, see what quantum entanglement says is that there's this concept of being outside of space-time, sort of. You know, it's like you tweak one and the other is instantly tweaked. Well, it was tweaked in space-time, but instantly, how does that happen? Nobody understands that. That's called non-locality, and it's real. It's like an RV and precognition. This is the way our universe works. Got to get that. Now, there's this guy Aronson who is really, I don't know, I'm quite impressed with him. And let me read you what he said here. In quantum mechanics, Aronson explains, you have to add up a bunch of numbers called amplitudes. Now, these amplitudes all have to do with these various probabilities, this bundle of probabilities, okay? So there are different ways that an event can take place. Some have positive amplitude, some have negative amplitude. They can cancel each other out. Here's the key line. The basic goal is to choreograph things so that the wrong answers cancel each other out while the right answers reinforce. This is exactly what we want to do in ARV. We want to learn how to cancel out anything that has to do with the decoy possible photo site and reinforce everything that has to do with the actual target. And it turns out when I read this from this Aronson, I already have some ideas on how to actually do that more than just requesting your consciousness to do it. But that's for another time. Now, this Aronson put together a rather long cartoon, if you want to see it, and it's actually quite interesting, where he discusses this in just some interesting and accurate terms. What are you reading? And I've just taken some selective sites, and they've made this very much like the first talk that a mother has to have with their son about sex, but this one's about quantum mechanics. I thought it was very funny. And she's talking about superposition doesn't mean and it also doesn't mean or. In quantum computing, the whole idea is just to choreograph a pattern of interference where the paths, now this is like two slit experiments where there's null points between them, where the paths leading to each wrong answer interfere destructively and cancel out, while the paths leading to the right answer reinforce each other. I hope you're getting a sense here. Well, and then he goes on, if you don't talk to your kids about quantum computing, someone else will. And he made a connection here, which I like to make, but it doesn't prove it, but quantum computing and consciousness are both weird and therefore equivalent. I think there's a lot of truth to that. They both have the same sort of weirdness involved in them. But the kinds of words that are being used here, which are generally used for particles, are exactly what we need to do and are doing with precognition. Now let's get to qubits, because I want to relate qubits to you. A qubit is similar to the concept of a standard bit. Okay, it's a memory element. In classic, well, it can hold not only the states 0 and 1, which is what happens classically, right? In all our existing computers now, we have 0 and 1s, and the way they're organized and the way you move them around is what makes a computer. But in quantum, it's a linear superposition of both states. So you have both of them being around potentially at the same time in the computer until you get the final answer. Here's another way of saying it, and another way which shows the power of it. So a classical bit is either 0 or 1. If you have n bits, and let's just look at the case with 4, with just these 4, ignore this one, there are 4 ways of or organizing them, okay, kind of fixed. In the case of n, you get 2 to the n possible permutations, okay. So you can have 0, 1, 1, 0, all those sorts of things which make it look, here they look like they're the same, I'm noticing, but there are 4 permutations when n is 2. But look at quantum bits. Now it isn't either 0 or 1. It's both 0 and 1 superimposed. But now notice it was 1 out of 2 and n. Now it's all of these possible permutations are around in the quantum computer. And then they collapse to an answer, but they're all there. So you have an enormous flexibility that you don't get with regular computers. Okay, so people are competing widely. Universities are competing over making better quantum computers. I mean, they're out there. The first one, and I got this from WikiLeaks. I started trying to do some research on this, but then I found this and I stopped. So I use this as my source for what you're going to see here, and I'm sure it's
Not WikiLeaks, Marty.
I'm sorry. Oh, I said WikiLeaks. Thank you. Wikipedia. Yeah, they must have stole that name from them. Yeah, thank you. Wikipedia. Um, and the first one with 2 qubits, and that turned out to be a really big deal because long before this they had talked about it, but now they actually made a physical world space, a 2 qubit one. And then they go on, they do 5, 7, they got to 1,000 in 2015, and here's 2017. There's this company called D-Wave that is up to 2,000 qubits. Now, IBM was real happy about making a 17 qubit, but I think what they're talking about here is a chip, which then you would put a bunch of them together, but I don't know. There's some controversy over different things, but I don't want to get into that. What I want to look at is um, Intel is developing a 17 qubit. Notice they use the word chip. Microsoft is involved. They've got a 40 qubit one. It turns out that Google is involved. I mean, all the big companies are involved because they know how big this is. So by taking that data and just simply plotting it on a curve, it looks like this. Now, here's the key, which actually relates ultimately to you. But let's just understand this curve. This now is on a log scale. So it's still the same numbers, but on a log scale, you're getting a straight line. Here we have 10, here we have 100, here we have 1,000, here we have 10,000. When you have curves like this, it's called exponential growth. And you can almost see if you were to draw a line through here, you can see it's increasing rapidly. I wanted to put this on another scale because I want to start talking now bigger numbers. So this again is the same data. Here's 1,000. 1,000 is 0.001 of a million. So it's exactly the same data, but we've extended it out a bit longer in time, and we're going to come back. We're going to come back to this because what I want to show you is something which is called Moore's law in regular computers. And I remember when I was back in school, we used to argue, and then actually when I was a working physicist working with these computers who were not very powerful back in the 60s. I started working with these things back in the 1960s. Um, um, the question was, how many microchips could you get per square inch? Okay, let me read this. Moore's laws refers to an observation made by Intel in 1965. He noticed that the number of transistors per square inch on integrated circuits had doubled every year since their invention. So this is called Moore's law. And all of us were talking about, when would this level off? When would this level? It never leveled off. Here we are on a log-log scale. Well, a log, semi-log. This is called semi-log. This is linear. This is logarithmic. Notice the factors of 10. Here's a million transistors here. And some of you who are into computers remember these numbers. They used to call the chips the 80486. Then they started calling them the Pentium. I mean, now we're almost up to 100 million. Transistors per square inch, and it keeps going and it keeps going. Okay, Moore's law is showing no sign of slowing down. We're getting into up here things like nanotechnology. Let me show you another curve which I found. I love this. This is computers, but this scale, again logarithmic, is calculations per second per $1,000 per the cost of the computer. Okay, logarithmic, 10 to the minus 4, 10 to the minus 2, 10 to the 10th. These are the early machines when I started getting into the business. The UNIVAC, the DEC, the IBMs, the early ones. Here are the Pentium machines. Okay, they're continuing to go. Right now, according to this author, okay, and here's the source, they're up to what they consider the power of a mouse brain. And we're getting up to the power of a human brain. They're talking numbers 2020, 2025-ish. Okay? Okay? Log, log. Here you are. The same data. Now I've put qubits on regular computers. Okay? This is a trillion. I'm going to start making the connections now with you, where trillion is sort of the base number. But we're working towards that with mechanical, what we would consider mechanical computers, but they're quantum computers using qubits. Now let's talk to first biology, and then we'll get to human-like, and we'll get to humans. First, I want you to understand that plants use quantum mechanics. Photosynthesis, we're really working very hard now to get more efficient with our solar panels. And in the last I looked, solar panels were maybe 20% efficient. I think someone has claimed 20% efficiency in terms of concerning the sunlight that goes on them into energy. Photosynthesis is 95% efficient. How does it do that? Well, they studied this, and it turned out the physicists, biologists, it was really physicists that were studying this, and this is the phrase at the bottom that I just made big here, found, what does this all mean? Not only, because what they found was it was quantum mechanics. Not only does quantum phenomena occur in living systems, because that's how they were so efficient, but the basic processes of life we take for granted, rely on the transfer of information backwards in time. That was their takeaway from their experiments. And that was because light was able to, let me see if it says it here. In effect, the excitation, turning the light into photosynthesis for the plant, it can feel these many states at once without having to use the energy, basically, to visit them individually. So we already have experiments showing that plants use this effect. Now, in plants, and did you see this clever arrow? In plants, there's this thing called microtubules. In humans, in the human nervous system, in one neuron, so this is a neuron, a sketch of a neuron. Here's a nucleus. Okay, that's where your DNA and all that good stuff is. But that then, for these long nervous system cells, your neurons, all of these black lines are microtubules. Okay? In each of your nervous cells, you have thousands of these microtubules. Here's a picture of microtubules. And notice they're not mechanical like we make things. Mother Nature just does it in her own way, and it's rather marvelous. And notice how they're connected, looking like a network, perhaps something like a computer network. They even, in this picture, okay, so this happens to be an animal cell, this wonderful micrograph of an animal cell, showing the nucleus again, and they even call it a microtubule network. Guess what this connects up to? Other nuclei. Now, do you know how many nuclei you have in your body? Right? We're getting back now to human beings. Give or take a few trillion, 37. 37 trillion cells, each with a nucleus. That's where your DNA is. Now, I'm saying let's take a point of view. Well, let's take a point of view that maybe your nucleus is a bit like a qubit. When you take that point of view, then you've got 37 trillion qubits in your body, all interconnected with these wonderful microtubules, which have been shown to have quantum mechanical capabilities. So now, maybe at least to quantify what level of quantum computer you are, we're up at the level of 37,000, 37 trillion. And I call these ZPE points because I want to go even further to make this hopefully deeply credible to you so you can feel how great you are. ZPE stands for 0-point energy. This micrograph, okay, is probably multiplied by a billion or so times what you're seeing here. So this is magnified by about a billion. If we go down to the 0-point energy, which is the lowest, smallest scale that quantum mechanics says you can get, this is where we have the 0-point energy or quantum. I want you to know that in here, there would be trillions of these points. Okay, so this is an artist's conception of a 0-point energy field. Here, instead of multiplying by 10 to the 9th for this picture, we're now looking at 10 to the 35th. And that's why I say you're looking at a few points, okay, here, compared to the trillions of points in just one of what we're calling a qubit. Now, here, and this came not from Los Alamos, but from one of the labs. They were talking about a video, and I showed it in another webinar, talked about it. They're talking about what this zero-point energy field has is enormous amounts of energy in it, as much as the fireball energies of a nuclear explosion. But it blinks in and out, in and out, in and out, very, 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 very fast. And it's like what they're saying is coming from nothing and disappears back into nothingness. Those are the words they use, because from the physical world perspective, they come in and then they disappear. However, nothing from the physical world perspective, we know there's more, and there is more. And what about the point of view that that when it disappears, it entangles with a non-physical reality, which is like outside of space and time. So when we do our precognition, this is the stuff we're touching. We're going outside of space and time, going down to the zero-point energy field with our trillions of qubits. I mean, that's really kind of a cool perspective. I want to go one step further, because I believe this is sort of how it is, and this is the first time I've ever shared this. And in fact, I probably only thought about it a month or two ago. But that's a distinction between the physical matrix and the non-physical, what I call universe of collective consciousness. This is non-physical. I've talked about this. This is where consciousness is fundamental, non-physical, the source of everything, through the zero-point energy field up to the physical world. And I think the matrix, when Ingo Swann used that word, I think it makes sense to think about that as being at the physical level, all connected. Still everything is connected. But through the zero-point energy field is where you get this non-physical UCC. At least that's the way I'm thinking about it now, because I want to make this distinction between going out to nothingness, which is really going out to the non-physical UCC. So this is where you make your connection with consciousness. Non-locality is happening right in here, and that's where the information is going. So quantum computers now can be viewed as it's a communication channel, all quantum computers, including you, between the physical and non-physical realities. So this zero-point energy, quantum foam, is the magnificent connection that you make. So here's our trillion qubit plot again, and a trillion qubits by 2085. Now we're getting up to units like humans. Humans 37 times this is, here's 10 times, we're up here. So we're talking the next millennium have quantum computers which have at least as many qubits, if you accept the assumption that your nucleus of each of your cells is a qubit. Probably have more than that, but that's not a bad place to start. So you already have a head start over what the computer world, what physicists, what engineers are trying to do. And don't ever forget that. You are really magnificent. They're talking and getting very excited about the magnificent things that they can do, but it's nothing like what you can do. I don't know if they'll ever be able to actually make one that can do precognition, but I believe that's one of the best signs of how far ahead you are from them. Now, what I'm telling you is also out there in literature. This Hameroff was the guy who was really talking about the microtubules. He and Penrose have a whole theory that we are a quantum computer. They only connected with the microtubules. I went deeper than that, but that's their model. Um, and you can see the brain is both a neurocomputer, as you would normally think of it, uh, but also a quantum computer. So you are a conscious quantum computer, and that's really a good thing. The first time I said this, and it was at the Monroe Institute in a workshop I was giving there actually with Skip Atwater, one woman jumped up, I mean, like almost out of her seat physically, and she said, "I am not a computer." And it really bothered her. I think she felt better after I went through some of this. I didn't go, but maybe not. The word computer is, as we normally think of it, is very different, as I hope you now appreciate, from quantum computer. And what is self-programming? Self-programming is basically being self-aware. You're aware now, and this is rather marvelous, and this is where consciousness as fundamental comes in. You're aware that you're a conscious being, and that with your action that you take in the moment, all you can do is take action in the moment, conscious action. You are changing yourself. You are reprogramming yourself. How did you learn how to walk? I mean, learning how to walk is a very complicated procedure. And you know what? You just sort of did it. And you don't know what's going on inside. You don't know what's going inside your electronic computer. Hey, you're in a word processor, you press a key, and magically a letter comes up on the screen. You don't know how that happens. That program is internal and invisible to you. Well, that's true of you also. I don't think you would want to be aware of it all, but you want to be able to know how to use it. You want to be the operator. And this is where self-programming comes in, and this is why we talk so much about using your feedback sessions to continue to program yourself to get better and better at this, because you are a self-programming quantum computer. I want to bring spirituality in this. I often do use the word non-physical, and you all know me, I think, well enough now that for me that means spiritual, non-physical. It's almost like, for me, the definition. Consciousness is fundamental. This universe of collective consciousness is the ultimate spirituality because it gets to this idea of oneness. This idea of non-locality. There's this reality of our being in a non-local quantum universe. No one disagrees actually with that. Now, the adding of this is the spirituality of oneness. If you're connected to everything, right? There's this ultimate meaning of oneness. And that's both in the physical world and in the non-physical world. That's the definition of spirituality. So oneness is this complete entanglement with everything, and I mean everything, including ideas and concepts and everything, here on Earth, any place else in the universe. So one universal. So using the language we've been using here, you can make statements like this and they almost begin to make sense, and I hope you agree. There's one universal quantum computer which is entangled with all the personal quantum computers. And personal quantum computer, I then say the more qubits the better. And let me just let me say a little bit more about this. Personal quantum computer is kind of interesting because the word personal is actually a very deep concept because you have a sense of who you are. But since you're connected to everybody else, you have a personal boundary. So you have your own personal quantum computer there, and it's a little vague, but it's connected to everybody else's quantum computer. But it's also connected to other kinds of quantum computers, even black holes. I'm willing to say that the black hole, which we talked about, is a personal quantum computer. I don't know what kind of personality a black hole has, what kind of essence it has, black hole, but if I'm willing to go out and define something that I'm willing to call a black hole, so I've defined that thing now, well, guess what? It is a quantum computer, as I indicated to you. Stuff goes in, stuff comes out. So in that very general sense of quantum computers, we are connected to all of them in the universe. The key turns out to be how strong is the entanglement with it. And entanglement is one of the most fundamental and mysterious concepts in quantum mechanics. And ARV is a beautiful way of appreciating entanglement through time. Because here you are, your whole goal at remote viewing session is to entangle with your feedback session, and at your feedback session time to entangle back with your remote viewing time. Make that a very strong entanglement. And that entanglement is within your personal computer at different times. Whew. Okay. Give me some feedback. Before we get into the next section will be to do feedback. What did you think about this? Did it make sense? Was it too vague? Do you buy it? Are you a quantum computer?
I mean, it's an interesting theory. I don't. How do we verify that? I think that we definitely have a huge impact on our reality. So if we're doing more than just computing, obviously, because we're affecting as well. And like you said, we're self-programming, but we also have an effect on the environment instead of just reacting to it. So I think there's more to it that we're still trying to discover as well.
Okay, good. Thanks, John. Yeah, the quantum computer is like a point of view. It's nothing to be proved. I mean, I think it's kind of a point of view. I happen to believe it's a reasonable point of view because quantum mechanics is going on inside us all the time. And the computer aspect is broader. You do have an effect on your environment, just like the black hole did. So computers have an effect on their environment. You know, when I use a word processor, out comes these letters. That happens to be its effect. As you get more and more qubits, you have more and more of an effect. In fact, one of the things I want to do is see if anybody's made an estimate of how many qubits there are, you know, in a mosquito, how many qubits there are in other entities. And maybe human beings have a lot more qubits than other creatures. But, you know, that I don't know. It'd be interesting to look at that kind of correlation.
Marty?
Uh-huh.
Um, well, as you were talking, my brain went immediately to Bruce Lipton and his thesis that he came to about 20 years ago that that the whole body communicated instantaneously through the use of cell membranes, that it wasn't nerve conduction, how our tip of our toe was communicating with our scalp instantaneously, but it was through one membrane talking to another, and that connection is non-local. And when he came to that realization, that changed him completely, and he started, he wrote his book, and he quit lecturing in medical school because they didn't want to hear it. And so as you were talking about the nucleus, but he figured it out that the nucleus is not the brain of the cell, it's the membrane, because the membrane is what reacts to other cells and knows that we got a brown bear chasing us up a tree, or that we got a car coming at us, or that some other little thing is happening.
Okay.
And that cell communication rather than the nucleus, but it's still the same idea as what you were saying.
Exactly. That's just that's exactly the point I want to make with you. I agree with you 100%. And again, it's a perspective. He's leading to the same thing because he's talking about the non-local connection, whether it's the cell membrane, whether it's the microtubules. It turns out microtubules have now been shown to have quantum mechanical effects. It may be that the membranes do too. That's why I think there may be a lot more qubits around than just microtubules, but I can count microtubules. And your point about the cell, let me show you a one-cell critter that has a paramecium that has 20 microtubules. You see them here? This is a slice. You see these things? These are called cilia, okay? These live in the water, and they actually have been shown to learn. They can learn to avoid electric shocks and stuff
like
like
a pomegranate.
Well, I don't know about that, but okay. But here's a picture of the cilia, and if you cut that apart, you have these microtubules, exactly like you have in your body. So a one-cell creature has a microtubule. Every cell in your body, I showed the connections between them, but inside them are also microtubules. So that's my focus on microtubules rather than the membrane. I don't particularly care. In either case, the fact that it's quantum information going through you as a human living being is the key point. And so, I think Lipton is a genius, and I'm so glad that he's out there sharing his point of view with so many people. Any other comments? Okay, so let's go on to feedback. Okay, so that was about right. That was about an hour. I'm going to try to do this every other Wednesday, the second Wednesday of a month, partially because it allows me to grow, because then I spend time researching this stuff and then I'll share it with you. Stuff that I think is really important for you to understand, different points of view. But here, what we'll get into now is the feedback for 305-125. For the newbies, how do you get that? So I just showed it to you, but I want to show you how you would get this in the context of, at least the winning entanglement protocol, but all the protocols, one way or another, will give you the feedback. We does it, as I said, through email and then links. So an email would come in. It would, and this is after the event is over. In this case, I had written photosite A had a lot of high numbers. Photosite B had 4.5. And you would then put in your email address. I use that one here. And there comes your feedback photo. So it's very simple to get. The protocol, as I say, is very simple. The magic and all the learning, self-learning, is all with the RV and feedback sessions. And you learn a lot during judging as well. Okay, so I have now copied that page to here. And let's go look and do feedback. And it turns out, John, yours is the first one here. And I'd like you to go through it here. In fact, later I'm going to show what you wrote. I was very impressed, John, with what you wrote in terms of in terms of what to do. Do you think you could do it here? Yep.
I don't. Can you refresh my memory? What are we talking about?
Yeah. In fact, here I'll show it. I'm going to show three. There were three here. This is what you actually wrote, and I was quite impressed with it. Try to keep this truth in mind. This is actually the beginning of your remote viewing. The process of ARV works backwards in time. What you want to do is completely forget about the incorrect photo site. So we're not going to show it. We're not going to talk about it. Focus only on the feedback photo. So you remember,
right? Okay.
You remember what you wrote this? Pat yourself on the back. Look at the photo and try to make it as interesting as possible.
Well, it'd be nice to go through each point because we could probably comment on each of those.
Okay, wait, I can do that. Okay, that's a good idea. And I'd like to do it here. And I'm giving you, and everybody should understand this, he is getting the biggest challenge. Let's see, wait, I just have to think about how I'm going to do this. I want to get them both on the screen at the same time, and I should be able to do that. Because on this one he had a miss. He's had some wonderful hits and everything, but on this one he happened to have a miss. And so the challenge and the opportunity, exactly, the challenge and opportunity to learn is in fact biggest with the miss. And so let's see, I'm putting you on the spot. And if you don't want to do this, John, you don't have to.
No, it's fine. I'm not attached to it.
I knew you would. And that's important, not being attached. When you get a miss, you get a miss. You do your feedback session and you move on.
I do find it curious. Towards my second point or whichever one it was, I actually remember which target this other one I was trying to describe, but it was very a good description of the wrong one. So displacement.
Right. And you know what? That always comes up in the feedback session, and then you use the 5-second rule and forget the other one. But of course, you're going to remember it a little bit.
Right. So, well, I want to remember it just enough to determine if it was displacement or a judging issue. Right. I think I mentioned that in that write-up. But
let's go through it. I like your idea. Yeah. We'll go through it point now.
I guess the first point was to remember that this is retrocausal. So I know that we do things in a different fashion linearly, but this is really the beginning of my session. And when you do feedback, you got to keep that in mind, that this isn't just look at the photo, oh cool, this matches my session, or it doesn't, and then turn it off. I mean, there's actually a process that's important to spend time, because right now I'm trying to create entanglement between my feedback. I'm trying to focus on this actual feedback photo and then make it interesting and then send that. And the more interesting I make it, the easier it is to detect, however many days ago that we did this, kind of like a ripple. Like you throw a ripple, or you throw a pebble in a pond, it creates ripples in every direction. And so you're trying to create a big enough ripple that you can feel it, 2 weeks ahead of time. It's weird talking about time, but,
Right. I really want to get this on here too. That's my challenge. Okay, wait. And I want you to read. Okay, so I think what I want to do, hold on, I'm trying to get them both so you can talk about them and see both your transcript and the
Well, we can go, if you just read off the thing and then we can talk about it and switch back.
one at a
That'd
time.
be fun. Yeah,
Um,
'cause I don't have it in front of me.
okay. I guess that'll work. We'll go back and forth that way. So, okay, so you've already talked about, in fact, you know what? Let me even move this. I'll move that one right there. Okay, so you've talked about one, precognition, match, find out what actually matches with your session. If you were just off or perhaps you made a mistake. Okay?
Okay, yeah, so here I want to see if I made a judging error, if it was close or not. And in this case, I don't think I did. I was clearly just on the wrong target, which is curious. I actually personally don't know how I feel about that. If I would rather have just had low scores, or describing the other target kind of indicates that I might have felt it was more interesting, which is likely. But
let me ask you this. Why didn't you mark motion here with a blue? Notice the way you do this, of course, is just right, but you didn't put a B here or
I did, because I already counted it in this at the bottom middle, if you see that.
Oh, so you only count them once.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't want to count the same information twice. Like if I put red, I mean, I've already set red.
Okay, and I'll tell you, in my opinion, that's debatable, because if red comes in as a separate element, okay,
Right.
and you
Or if
write
there's
it down
two red objects,
separate,
yeah, I see your point.
that says there's, red is coming in strong, and I actually do count it twice, which makes another good point while we're talking about feedback and judging. It becomes a bit personal, and you learn from your own experience. We're giving broad outlines here.
Yeah, well, I guess it would also matter if I had been off in my judging, which I think I judged it fairly well.
Okay.
Even though I only counted motion once, but
right. I'm not disagreeing, and that's part of your feedback, and that's what you're saying. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the other?
Okay, so you pat yourself on the back for each hit. We really didn't do that. And you see, and that is important because it also gets you more focused on this picture.
Right.
Like,
plus, you don't want to ignore data that your subconscious is giving you, because I don't want to say it has its own personality, but you don't want it to stop giving you information because you're ignoring it, which could happen.
Yeah. And so what did you really get that was good here that you feel really good about?
The motion. I like the motion aspect, probably the main gestalt in this.
Well, what about, I thought this one was right on and you didn't even mark it. Obviously, I'd look at earth, dirt, grass.
Well, you see how the lines separate it? That's that's like one whole idea. So I was trying to describe here, I feel like it's structure, and rather than it being concrete like a city, that it's like in the country somewhere, and then I was kind of describing the whole thing as if I had labeled it,
Okay. And I guess I'm just alerting us to, this is another case. Would you take this as a separate element coming through? Because it certainly matches this very nicely. Earth, dirt. That even looks like grass. It's an observation I'm making, and I'm making it now mostly so that we emphasize how you can emphasize this picture some more. So that's all.
This is kind of a hacked up, strict CRB session, like a formal CRB, because this is a quick session. But
right.
In formal CRB, I would have these labeled, and I would kind of describe each one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why when I separate it like that, I know they're all together. So
this was one thing that came in.
Yeah.
Bio means people to you, not biological vegetation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a different.
Right.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm keeping just
It doesn't have to. You can train yourself to where bio is more broad,
Right.
but I like to have it specify just people in that one.
Okay.
So yeah, the ones I did get, I gotta be proud of. Motion, especially the gestalts. That's the one that I really want to be proud of the most. I want to be proud of the gestalts and the ideograms are what I'd like to focus on. But yeah,
right.
there it is.
Okay. And so you spent time on it, look at the photo, try to make it as interesting as possible in your own words. The more interesting you make it, the more you are focusing on the photo. The more you focus on the feedback photo, the more entanglement you are creating with your actual session. So, yeah.
So this one I would like to pretend like I'm there, and if I was there, I would like to be feeling the mist on my face and like smelling the fresh air and like hear the motion of the waterfall and hopefully go swimming in it or something like that. That imagine how peaceful it would be that you're not at work and you're able to relax and stuff like that, making it interesting. It looks like a boring photo, but if you were there, it would be gorgeous, So I'm just trying to make it like if I'm there, wow, I would be like, wow, this is great.
And it's let me comment on something you said earlier, which a lot of people say, that maybe you found the other one more interesting, and maybe you're not going to change the past. So you had said that, and at the time it was more interesting. But doing what you're doing now and knowing you're going to do this in all the future ones, then maybe both of them will have even interest, and that won't be an element for possibly misjudging or possibly getting wrong information. So that's really important to make it interesting like this. And I'd like to add one other thing. Your list, and you come to it later, and it's really very good. What would you like to add? What did you miss that you wish you added? I don't think you have to go to that list in order. Like right now, you're seeing the water. You didn't have water in here. I mean, I would really spend a lot of time getting into the feeling of water. How should that communication channel transmit water to you as a gestalt? Because
Okay,
you
so
missed that.
that's going to come up. It's going to come up as part of the process. I think it might be the next one, actually.
Yeah, okay. But one of the points I want to make is that came up to me now, and if you're in your feedback session, you can deal with it then because it came up naturally. In other words, I'm saying I don't think you have to go through these in linear order. Now, maybe you do, and maybe that's what you intended.
Yeah, so the blank sheet of paper one, I think.
Okay, last, take a blank sheet of paper, describe the elements of the photo. Okay, maybe that does come up naturally then. While you're actually looking at it, this trains you to communicate, it sets examples and to develop. Okay, let's take a blank sheet of paper and
So
describe
here,
the elements of the photo. Okay, the key elements of the photo, right? Describe them. And that includes sketching as well.
so let's see the photo again real quick. So I would take a blank sheet, obviously, but I would start with the same protocol in the same order. The first thing I would want to do is write the coordinate, and then I wouldn't do a normal ideogram where it's really fast and unconscious. I would consciously, very carefully, make a very clear ideogram of what I see. So I would see motion, and I would definitely do an ideogram for water, and whatever else I see. And that's part of the training. Now that's training for future sessions. And then I would write things like, okay, peaceful, outdoor, nature, green, white, brown, rocky, hard, soft, wet, rushing sounds, things like that. And if you notice down here in sounds, I actually did misjudge the heavy breathing thing. That could actually be the sounds of the waterfall. I did catch sounds, but
and grunts.
Yeah. Well, grunts, I don't know if I would do it, but because this would be a constant sound.
Yeah, okay.
And I actually usually I do pick that up, constant sound. But anyways, and then I would go down each line and fill out a blank sheet of what I actually see, and that is actually training for future sessions.
Perfect.
Is what we're doing here. And then also, the longer you look at this photo and the more detail you pick out of it, the more entanglement you're creating. So it's kind of a twofold. It's kind of a win-win there.
Perfect. Very nice. Very nice. And a sketch? Do you put a sketch on that blank sheet of paper?
Yeah, I would have a hard time sketching this, to be honest. I might. You can actually, believe it or not, you can do a Gestalt level sketch where you can say, rather than the actual physical sketch of it, you can say, you can draw like down at the bottom, I would do something for land. And then up in the top right, I would do a water ideogram. And then over here, in the top left, I would do something like nature. And then it's not actually a picture, but it has the Gestalt elements in the right areas of the photo. And that can work too if you're not good at drawing,
Okay, I understand. I want to say two things. One, I want you to have that ideogram lecture because you use it so much, and I think that would help other people work their ideograms. But in terms of sketches, this is easy to sketch. I mean, you sketch lines around this. You put wiggly water between. You do it over here. And then you do a couple of things like this, and on the sketch I write green and vegetation, and that's it. The sketches, in fact, the last thing in the world for me, because I'm a terrible drawer, is to try to do anything like an overlay sketch. I just, if I had done just a few things like that, it would be clear it was this picture as opposed to the other one.
Well, yeah, there's two levels to sketching that you can do, and then even CRV trains Gestalt level sketch, and then you can get more detailed from there. In fact, you can draw a Gestalt level sketch, and then you can probe those areas of it, and then get more detail, and then you can actually have a more refined drawing later on, or even stage 6 rather than doing clay or something.
Exactly. But this would be the stage 2 or 3, right? Where you just quickly draw a few lines that capture what's going on here, and that would usually be enough to distinguish it from the other, and that's the level of sketch I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. This is very good. I think this is very helpful for anybody who's going to be watching this and listening. Okay, a blank sheet. So we did that one. Here's an example. Oh yeah, go ahead. Describe this example. That was a really good example.
Yeah. So one of the photos, I just from doing a bunch of sessions and noticing when I have misses, sometimes I really do gravitate towards a more interesting photo to draw out. And in one instance, it was a close-up of a gray mailbox, and there really wasn't much color or anything really. It was a square mailbox, like one you'd see at an apartment. It was just really, really boring. But if you're going to try and make something like that interesting so that you can create more entanglement, you can do things that are conceptual, like what is the concept of a mailbox? It means communication between people that are far from each other. In fact, even historically, if you go way back before we have internet or telephones, that was the main way you would communicate, and then they had telegrams and things like that. But this is how you get your mail. This is how you get stuff from Amazon. You could have it could be your birthday. You could have something come in, and it's a present. Wow.
I don't know what that was. Thank you for turning it off. Whatever it was. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you can make it conceptually. You stretch your mind a little bit and try and make it interesting. It's not always easy. But I think you get the idea just from a gray mailbox, like blah. How are you going to make that interesting? Especially since it's a close-up. But kind of stretch your mind and think about how you can make it interesting. It actually does mean something conceptually as well.
You gave an example, sort of after the fact. Let me give you an example of somebody who did the same thing, and it worked out very well for them because they knew they were going to do it. One of the pictures was a bunch of standard, like number 2 pencils, unsharpened, on a table. Again, going for geometry, just like in your case, I guess it was going for squares, going for long geometry, and it had the colors and everything. And other people saw it, and this was again at a workshop, and they saw it and they said, "That is really terrible. That's boring." That word "boring" comes up a lot.
Right.
This person, this person put on their transcript the word lead, machinery, a few other words getting at what he did at feedback time, which he got into how extensive and interesting it must be to make pencils. I mean,
Right.
have you ever thought about how you make a pencil? That must be a really complicated. How do they get that lead in there? Anyway, he had on his session exactly what you're talking about. So it works. You have to know that you're going to do it. And I think most importantly, you have to accept responsibility for making it interesting. You can't get
Right.
into the blame mode. Ugh, look at that horrible pair again. Because whenever people do that, it's always because they have a miss. It's like a self-fulfilling kind of prophecy. So it's up to you to have the positive psychology that they're all going to be interesting, because you're going to make them that way.
Yeah. Well, the overall point I think is that the more mental energy, especially if you can add emotional energy to it, the more mental and emotional energy you can put into it, the bigger the ripple, the more entanglement you're creating, and it makes your RV session easier.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Considering that so.
Very good. Okay, now I highlighted this one. I had originally intended not to go point by point because I didn't think we would have time, but we're doing really great. And here's the one which you said that I thought was just a great summary. We don't have to just describe the physical aspects of the photo. We can also describe what it may represent. The most important part of this is the more you build up interest in the story, the more mental energy and focus you put into it, the better your RV session will be when you do it. Our consciousness resides outside of time, and that focused energy is creating a ripple that travels back in time to when you did your session. You just have to remember to close that time loop by doing the work during feedback. This was very well said. The whole thing, I really appreciate the time you took to put this together, John.
Yeah, sure. I think we could do an entire session on feedback and just really dig into it. But yeah.
Well, and this has certainly gone a big step in that direction. And then you said, in many ways, the feedback process is more important and nearly as complex as the RV session. Granted, it's not as sexy because the mystery of what could it be is now known, but the process is still extremely, extremely, extremely important. Okay. And then at the end, you do a new blank sheet of paper, which is great. Some people do it on their own sheet, but see, that kind of limits what they can do. The idea of doing it on a new sheet of paper is excellent. And then do you write end of feedback session or something like that when you're done, because it's a full session?
Yeah, and then I attach it to, and then I put all of the session and the feedback together, so I can go over it if I need to. But let me touch on that. The reason why you want to do a new sheet, first of all, you don't have enough room in here to in my mind, to do it
Right.
correctly, and you're going to miss out on the benefit of the training moving forward if you do it that way. But it's better than nothing. So if you don't have time, do what you can. But if you have time, then do it, flesh it out.
And that also is a very important statement, which I will add to always take the time. You shouldn't do the RV session in the first place if it's going to be rushed, if you don't have the time to do it. And you shouldn't do your feedback session if you don't have the time to do it right, in my opinion. And yes, we're all human. And so we do sometimes rush things, but it'd be best if you didn't. And you would probably have a higher hit rate. Okay, very good. Thank you, John. Let's go to the next one. In fact, Evelyn, you're here. So this should look familiar to you. Why don't you turn on your mic and why don't you do a feedback session pretty much like
Okay,
John did.
I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, judging, I didn't quite do it. I think I've learned a lot just in the last month or two about judging. So, and doing this rejudging project has helped too, because I'm seeing how other people, how I don't know how they judged it, but how other people did sessions, and then I have to judge them objectively without knowing what their thoughts were about it other than what they wrote down. So it's been an interesting process. So I remember doing this and looking at it now, I have to change what I had a lot of displacement. There's no other way to say it, but I think that there's aspects that I put for A that could have very well also been B.
That you didn't mark. See, that's one of the things
Right.
which is so important to learn, which helps you judge, because then you judge more carefully.
Like the first sketch, that's the kind of the double ovals. If you turn this thing sideways, and that's most of this drawing, if you turn it sideways, it fits the waterfall better. So that's almost that rock to the right, and also the shape underneath it then. So I have to remember that a lot of times I seem to draw things sideways or upside down. So actually that first sketch is a good B overlay if you turn it sideways, and even if you did it a mirror image, turn it sideways and flipped it up.
And let me also say the fact that you had two. If you flip it, then you're right. You get one this way, and this smaller one would be this one, is what you're seeing. But the fact that you got two, even that alone, in my mind, might be a small B, because two is one of the things you get at it.
Well, I gave it a small B, but I'm saying it could have been a big B. And then the second one, again, if you turn it sideways, you could call that a waterfall. Yep. So that one, when I was viewing that first picture, or when I was doing the session, I felt like I was maybe seeing a distant view of a ship, which was the roof on that building. So that's what I thought this sketch was, and I wrote ship ? So that's kind of what I wrote. But if you turn it sideways, it could very well be a waterfall. So again, that could be a B if you turn it sideways.
So that's good, because you're focusing on waterfall a lot, and that's shining that up. Good. Go ahead.
And then the third sketch, I gave that an A or a B. Again, that could be that rock to the right, and I did give it a small B, so that could be a big B. And the next one down, definitely turned sideways, could be a waterfall with the water spraying out, at the bottom. So
also look at all the lines. Yeah.
I knew I wrote broom straws because during the session I saw it as long things sticking out, and I was thinking maybe fur, but it could very well be the fingers of water. So, Oop. And then the bird face is.
Wait! I lost you here someplace. Oh, there you are. Okay, I missed somebody. Okay.
The top of the drawing there, where that looks almost like an ear, the top of, not the drawing, the top of the photo site, almost like an ear or something in the rock. That could very well be what I saw as a bird face. I decided it was the door on that building, but it could very well
No
see
building.
that.
No
You
building.
know, I was trying to see. I was trying to see the, you
Right.
know, that
Well, that could be.
something in the center there, and that could very well be what I couldn't figure out what it was because it was kind of moving and changing shape, but I knew it was something that was inside something else. So that could very well be that. Didn't even give that one a little B. And then on the other side there, the open sky with bumps like forested mountains in the distance. That I don't know where that one fits in this one, but
Well, out of the picture, this certainly has a
yeah,
top to it, and that looks an awful lot like, if you were just focusing on this, that would be
on the
something you
shape
would
and right.
on the
I'm not
top, which you
description.
can't see, but you could certainly infer a top. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't go forever, and there's sky
Yeah.
above. And then this stuff looks a lot like this now, doesn't it?
It does, and also, that waterfall has to come from a mountain
Yep,
because it has to come from something up higher. It wouldn't fall like that.
yep.
So that definitely should have gotten at least a small B, just because this is a mountain scene, even though you can't. It's a close up.
Yep.
But if you were standing where the photographer was and you opened up to a wide angle lens, you'd probably see the mountain. So,
With
so
high.
again,
Yeah.
again, there's a whole lot more there that I could change now that I know more, and
And let me say this: it doesn't change your judging session. Um, the only thing it does is hopefully teach you maybe how to be more alert to that sort of thing in the future. But also, I mean, I can't fault you for not seeing this here. Now it's obvious. And that may have very well have been what the sub was trying to tell you. Um,
yeah,
so just sort of be open to being told that sort of things in the future. Like, oh, look, if I add what is obviously outside and then I take this to be this, that'd be great. But I also think because you got so much of the other, tell your subconscious also right now, why don't you just really give me so much more about the actual photosite target that judging becomes easy. Make that one of your goals. Um,
This is where that blank sheet of paper will come in handy, because if you write it out how you would like to see it, then
yes.
you're telling it exactly how you want it.
Yes, this would have been, thank you for giving me what you did. You always stay positive. He's a good friend. Um, but yeah, it would have been a lot better if you had just simply done this. Okay.
right.
And the water,
Now
you also did not, though this to me, I don't know why. When I looked at this, because I don't have as many good ideograms yet as John does, but I looked at that and that to me looked like downward motion. But what did that ideogram mean to you?
well, that's the one thing I haven't learned completely what ideograms mean.
Oh,
And
okay.
I need to go back and study them more, because looking at it now, I would say it probably would say water to me,
Maybe. Well,
You can
ask
make it
John,
up.
flowing water.
what would it mean to you,
Yeah.
John?
Well, it's not. Ideograms are personal. It
Yeah.
has to see now that's there are some natural gestalts that you could have somebody completely untrained and say, I want you to give me a half a second drawing of what this thing is. And a lot of times they'll come up with the same thing, just naturally. But you can train it to look like anything you want, whatever you feel comfortable with. But as long as it's quick and you're consistent in practice with it, you can grab something formal like everybody uses some similar symbols, because I think there might be some sort of power in that, where so many people have the same symbol.
Right.
Maybe it makes it easier. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know you can train your own symbols for sure as well.
Okay, well, someday you're going to give us that ideogram lecture or webinar. Okay, and the only other thing is really on this blank sheet of paper, and even now, Tell your subconscious water. I really want maybe even just the word come up, or this kind of shape in my ideogram, um, um, an action, and add that right now. I really want you to give me that kind of information, whether it's through words or simple sketches, and you do that on that blank sheet of paper. Um, so you always go after the stuff that you missed that you wish you had gotten as well. Okay, and then there's this one. And Millie, are you here? Yes, you are. Wonderful. I sent emails to all of you telling you. Very good. Okay, why don't you do yours here, Millie?
No.
Yep,
Hello?
we hear
Hello?
you. Maybe a little
Okay.
louder. Can you? Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So I intentionally grade myself low on purpose.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm trying to look at this, remember which one it was. So before, when I was practicing RV consistently many years ago, I was always getting things sideways and upside down. So I don't know if this was a repeat from my habit, but it could have been upside down waterfall was what I had gathered, like the mountain was actually at my bottom there, and those kind of things, the
Okay.
lines going up and down may have been. So I was wondering about that, but I was trying to get away from, I was trying to like reorganize my mind to do it correctly. So this is what had happened. So, um,
All right. So on a blank sheet of paper, you could have done almost those exact shapes. I mean, that's really good. But
yeah.
do them a little different in the right order, and you just told yourself your sub that. That's good. What else do you see there that's good? I see lots of stuff.
Um, yeah, I always struggled with the colors, which I don't always get all the time historically, and I'm used to getting more, sometimes sounds were a lot better, and the sight. I do have this um, fear, I guess, of like teleporting myself to the scene and then not being able to get back. So it's like almost like I'm restraining myself and I'm preventing myself from fully being on the scene non-locally, if that makes any sense.
Can I
Right.
comment on that real
Yeah.
quick?
Yeah, please do.
So one of the techniques that some people use is the video screen. So you can stay where you are and just imagine. I mean, you can even stare at your own computer as long as it's blank. But imagine there's a computer screen in your head, and then turn it on for 2 seconds, and then turn it off, and then just describe what you get. And then you're not going anywhere, but you can still describe it.
Okay, I could try that.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't, and I had some slides in my earlier presentation about teleporting, which in fact they're now doing at a very low level. They're now talking about very low level biological teleporting things. Um, I think what's important to remember in this context is if you do bilocation, what you are, quote, teleporting is your consciousness that's there anyway, right? Your consciousness is everywhere. So you're just entangling more strongly with the consciousness at the target. You're not, I don't think, actually, there is one historical um, thing which I've heard of where a person did teleport. He was supposedly actually at another site and he was interacting with people, but I think he was at both sites at the same time. It's like he didn't disappear
Yeah.
from one site, which is what you're worried about, right?
Which I can't comment on it, but yeah.
Yeah, it was. God, I'm trying to remember it. I think it was a religious person. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We both, you hear about all these things, but that one I think was reasonably well documented. Um,
Mm,
okay, thank you for sharing that fear. I think it's one that you might want
yeah.
to also try to get rid of the fear, but
Okay.
John?
I'm going to try that thing John was telling me
Yeah, I was
about.
going to say that's a good suggestion. That keeps you here, but in most bilocations, um, certainly I've never heard of a remote viewer that bilocated, um, feeling that the body was actually there. I know Mel Riley, someone thought
Hmm.
his body was there. um, whether it was or not, we don't know, but Mel certainly came back. He was clearly a standard bilocation kind of thing. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's go on with your
Okay.
feedback session. I mean, you got misty fog, which was actually one of the words John wished he got. Um, Slippery, smooth. Well, you should go through them. There's so many here that.
Yeah. Uh, I think I AOL'd the specific word descriptors because I thought that they were wrong, like deep water, wide river, something like that, which ended up being right. But the descriptor words, it was more or less the it was non-sight. I wasn't using third eye, and that's why I was like kind of trying to put it all together without it actually seeing it.
Mhm.
So that's why this one was a little hard for me.
Well, okay.
So
But I mean, this was really a good one. This was really,
um,
this
What
was
was the
really
score
good.
on that, Marty?
She gave it a
Is that
4,
good?
and you can see it down here. And
Okay.
it's interesting,
or
and that was the correct side. And you went through, and that's wonderful. Did you find this, with the fig, that whole about 50% hard to do, or
yeah,
was it okay?
yeah. No, it wasn't hard. The equation wasn't hard. Um, just determining what was the fig was a little harder.
Right.
So there's a like an ideogram at the top underneath that number, which might not mean anything. It's just scribble, and then later on you get like the real stuff maybe.
Hmm.
Um, is
Well,
that
and a fig
yes?
sometimes is a combination of things. You certainly got the water fig, um, first
Yeah.
impression gestalt. I call it that, but it isn't always the first impression. And let me see. Did you get any? Yeah, you got humming, thumping. You got the sound,
Okay.
um, and crackling, cracky, and you got the motion. Yeah, see, I would put
Mm-hmm.
moving all of that into the fig category.
Okay.
Um, wouldn't you, John?
Yeah, I'm not the greatest at scoring with that system, but
Yeah.
I might even put the idea of water that she had in there,
The
and
idea of
mist
what?
and
Wait.
fog,
I,
water and
what?
mist.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah, sure. The water was a fig. Absolutely.
I would have given her a 1 for that personally.
You mean for the
Oh.
fig part?
Right? It's
Right.
from 0 to 1, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, for the fig part. I agree.
Okay.
I agree. So I think you underscored this one, but
Yeah, and you'll get that from me all the time.
yeah. Okay, that's better cautious. We do everything we can to not get misses. Um,
Yeah, I have no pride.
Millie, that was excellent. Thank you. Okay. So photosite.
Marty,
Yep.
Marty, on
Yep.
that last one, the river, long, wide, deep. I mean, that's what that is. That's a river.
Yep. It may be a pool, but it probably is a river. It's going someplace. There's
Right.
a lot of water.
It's the
It's the
beginning of
beginning
a
of the
river.
river.
That's the,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
so
the head
that
of the
river,
river.
long, wide, and that pool's probably pretty deep. So I think that's right on.
Yeah. No, I think Millie said it right. She grades conservatively, and even with that, she did get the right one. But I think if you up this to a 1, she'd probably be up to a 5 or a 6, probably a 6 or yeah, something like that. Okay, very well done. Um, very good. So unless there are any questions about feedback that we went over, let me just close this while feeling pretty comfortable. Um, as you can tell, I use this a lot. I like this one, but it just has so much depth behind it. Because what we do is precognitive telepathy with ourselves. What a marvelous skill to build up. And it's one which I believe you can use in lots of other aspects of your life as well. And I've given talks where health is the focus, and it's very much the same kind of concept. And with all of this, really enjoy this wonderful mystery of precognition. And I just want to add the magnificence of you. I believe each of us really are quantum computers. And in the sense that non-locality is just built into our being. Entanglement is built into our being. Free will, the fact that we can do things only in the moment, which is, that's all computers can do. They only act now. They're making whatever they do now. The idea of looking at us as the most sophisticated quantum computer that we certainly can imagine at this point in time, I believe frees you up to get better at whatever you want. I mean, come on, trillions and trillions and trillions of qubits gives you a lot of capabilities. But now you have to learn how to program it. Now, you've done an awful lot of natural programming up to now in your life. As I said, learning how to walk, learning how to talk. I mean, come on, those are ridiculously complicated things. The kind of intelligence you have, all of these things are what they're looking at on doing these simple machines when they get up to maybe 10,000. I think when they get up to 10,000, artificial intelligence is going to be at a new level. Well, you're so much above that. Recognize that, and using that, figure out how to better program yourself. One of the words which has come up here a lot that is so important is so much of what we're doing is personal. You learned how to walk in a very personal way. ARV is a very personal process, and it teaches you about yourself, but it also is a process where you are going to have to personally learn how to, using our quantum mechanical language, program yourself to get better and better. And frankly, none of us know what the limits to that are, but I believe we're just barely touching the surface of what can be done with our own consciousness. So with that, I'll end with this guy, because all of this is really only important if it really does help our health, wealth in the broadest sense of that word, which really means recognizing that we are all connected and sharing your wealth, which is both knowledge and use of money. Money is just energy, how you use it. And with this, all of this does come a special kind of wisdom, I believe. So thank you for joining us here. Questions, comments? I'd love to get Bruce Lipton. I'm looking at the chat box here, which I don't get to do before, but I would love to get Bruce to do a talk with at the very least, and even better to come to one of our app conferences. But I don't know.
Marty, what about What about Hal Puthoff, considering the recent developments in his, I'm sure he's doing this to get funding for whatever research he's doing, but I'm curious because he didn't actually make any statements, so I'm curious what he thinks about all that.
Well, I have asked Hal in the past to join us. Um, he did give a talk at IRVA, but it was just about his past work. I wanted him to talk about his feelings about consciousness and key and all kinds of other stuff, which he and I have talked about, and I've actually used some of his writings on that and other stuff. He he's very deep into this consciousness stuff, but he did not want to talk about that. And one of the things he said was it could affect his professional career. So,
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just,
now with respect to this To the Stars,
he's openly joined the board, and he's, even
right,
on stage with them. So I know he didn't make any comment, but it's,
it's become controversial. And if you're asking me for my opinion, it's his presence there that outweighs the things are saying about DeLong. Is that his name?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
DeLong apparently in some circles has been considered negative because he talks about ETs as being um, bad ETs, and many people, including Greer. And I just watched Greer's Unacknowledged movie. I don't know if you've seen that, John. It's on Netflix.
Right.
I recommend it if you want to understand that point of view, and it certainly made it a lot of sense. Though the conspiracy part of the Illuminati part, I just don't know if they're as powerful as he puts them out to be. In
I have a
fact,
problem with Greer because some of the things that he's describing, because I'm sort of on the inside of some of that, and he goes off the deep end describing it, and so it makes me question the rest of what he's saying. So I have a hard time, with him in general.
well, and I just have a hard time knowing how deep. I use the word Illuminata now because that goes way back, and that's ultimately, I think, what he's talking about. The super powerful group. But and it may be a large group now. I think there's no reason to believe the group hasn't grown, if from his perspective. But I just don't know how powerful they really are, and I would like to think that To the Stars, and with Hal Puthoff being there, I do think on balance that the negative things which people say about DeLong are outweighed by, I don't think Hal would be there if he didn't believe that they were going to be able to put out the free energy ideas, which I know he's
Right.
been working on. That's what he's been working on. Or faster than light vehicles. He has contracts with NASA working on at least better propulsion systems, is the way they put it. But
Well, apparently they have some piece of material as well that they can demonstrate. So my opinion is that he's there because, hey, we're going to get funding for our experiments, which is totally understandable for a scientist. And that's my opinion on why he's there, and that's also why he's not commenting, because he may not necessarily agree with where DeLong is coming from, which I also question on some of that. But he said some things that I know to be true. Also, DeLong did. So that was just very interesting. Oh, do you know what? I've never heard Russell Targ mention anything from this subject, and and it's hard to.
You mean about the?
Well, no, not just To the Stars, but the UFO thing at all. So
well, I think he's
does he even have an opinion on it?
I don't know, but I think you know that I just came out. I don't know how long ago it is, where I did everything I could to separate the two. I think that's Russ's opinion, because UFOs, and it's actually changed, I think, in the last few years, were more kook connected even than remote viewing.
Right.
And so
yeah.
I didn't want to entangle myself with that at all, and I did everything I could to leave that. But I no longer believe that. I believe that the evidence now, and almost a consensus, so the kook part isn't around as much as it was before, is so strong that there's no doubt that there's a phenomenon there that is real. All of these jet pilots, all these military people, the example they gave in To the Stars with, was it the Enterprise, but one of the big, military ships. I looked at that. All of that kind of evidence is, there's something big going on, and I think we ought to try to pay some more attention to it. And it's connected in the sense that it seems clear to me that telepathy would be a very natural way to make contact.
Absolutely. I think if you're a spacefaring species, that should be the default. And if you don't have it, you would probably evolve it in order to communicate, because it's just, I mean, if you study, so even Nancy Deterred, we usually have this conversation, even if you study just language in your own planet among humans, it's a very difficult thing to learn and become efficient at. And if you're gonna travel the galaxy and meet other, it seems telepathy is just obviously would be the most useful thing, because there is no language to translate. Then you would just have to, it would just be social cues and maybe how you express yourself. You would have to learn some about that. But
yeah, but I totally right. Because what you do is now it's more, words are just concepts. A word is a very nice way of sharing a concept. So what you do is you take your concept for your words, you put it down to the universe of collective consciousness, goes to the other person, comes up, and then they use their words. So that's sort of magnificent. Anyway, I think that's the answer to why Russ hasn't done anything. I suppose I could ask Hal to do a presentation on To the Stars and just leave it at that. I mean, if he would do that, that would be terrific, of course.
Even if his thoughts are in disagreement with it, I'm just curious.
Well, you would ask all those questions. I wouldn't put any of that to him
right.
at this point.
Yeah, I'm on the fence, though. I know.
Well, on the fence of what? On the fence of what? On the fence of whether there are ETs?
No, because I've been in aerospace 22 years, and I'm a military contractor, so I've been out where they are, and I know they're real because I've seen it more than once.
So the fence,
not aliens.
What's the?
I'm not talking about. I've seen the craft more than once.
Okay.
And so I know that stuff is out there.
Right.
That's no question. But attaching this to remote viewing, because we are still, for some reason, fighting for legitimacy, and then now we're opening the door for kooks and conspiracy theorists and disinformation agents, which are also out there. It's just we're throwing a lot of wrenches into the mix, but yeah, it's totally a worthwhile conversation, and I have no doubt that those things are real. I just kind of wonder how far we should attach it to remote viewing and things like that, because, well, we had that issue with Courtney Brown and back in the day, remember that? And then Heaven's Gate, and then you had Ed Dames saying that all.
Right.
So if remote viewing is legitimate, which we can actually prove statistically, but if that's also true, then why do we have so many different stories of the same subject from different viewers? There's some consistency problems, but
okay. Well, I thought you might be on the fence with Gear's point of view of the Illuminati idea that they're keeping secret. I mean, in that unacknowledged, he says they have.
To know that, sir.
Well, that's exactly right, unfortunately, if they're as good as he says. But they say he actually has a piece of something which they can use for zero-point energy. And that's what I'm hoping Hal will, in a gentle way, reveal to us. And it'll make it look like, no, the government hasn't been lying to us, and we're just now inventing it. And that's the strategy I'm seeing for disclosure.
I can tell you why they're doing that. you know, if you research UFOs back in the day, that they literally did, and I did the research because I was in the Air Force, and we we had these discussions with these guys out there. They could literally fly into our airspace, our controlled airspace, and fiddle around, taking measurements of our nuclear silos, turning power on and off. There's just nothing that we can do about it, and you can't have an organization like the military, who's supposed to protect the people, admit that these things can come into our airspace and do whatever they want, and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Which is true. That would scare people. So it's easier to deny it and have everybody believe that they're safe rather than cause a panic. And they don't. I mean, how are you as the military going to admit that they can come and do whatever they want and we can't do anything?
Wow.
That you can't admit that.
Now the other side of that, of course, is that shows that they're friendly. Because if they wanted to, they could have destroyed us already.
Well, that's easy. I mean, they don't even need weapons to do that. If they can go out into space, then they can grab an asteroid and just push it right towards us, and kinetic energy would do the rest of it, right?
Right. A lot of ways they could destroy us if they wanted to,
Yeah.
and so that's my point, and that's where DeLong I think goes wrong, because every indication is that they're friendly, and I think they want us to grow up.
I have to look at DeLong's statements again because I didn't actually. I saw some people's comments that he's saying they're all evil aliens and stuff like that. That wasn't what I took from it, but I think he is concerned about the threat, and there might possibly be a threat out there. But then obviously we have friends on our side as well, because it would be easy for them to do whatever they want.
Right.
So there's some sort of there's definitely not all evil out there. That I totally disagree with that. You know.
Okay, I think we've done enough, because I agree with you. I've crossed the line. I'm willing to talk about this and all that, but I do not want to make it even close to a dominant theme of what we're doing in app or APPI. But it's a subject out there. It's certainly connected to consciousness and the capabilities of consciousness. And frankly, my whole talk on quantum computers is connected to this rather directly, because I believe that advanced civilizations, who may very well be 1 million years ahead of us, look at that semi-log chart, look how many qubits they can make, let alone have it within their own bodies, and some combination of that. So I think it's actually quite relevant.
So you had Nancy DeChurch on.
Yep.
She had an interesting take on it, and I'm in the middle of reading her book. Have you looked at Angela Smith's work on her latest book, where she was sort of remote viewing the different species out there and having a conversation? I thought that was really interesting. No, not really a way to verify it, but very interesting book from her.
Now, I haven't looked at either, but maybe we'll have both of them on and they can talk about their book. That's the way, right now, it turns, time is such a precious quantity. There's just too many things to read. And I do these research things from time to time, and I read summaries, and I'm just always trying to go for the bigger picture. And then I have these talk withs, and I get educated through them. So maybe we'll have Nancy do a talk with on her book.
Nancy's fantastic, and Angela Smith, I don't know if she would come on, but
she would. I think I might have even had her once. I can't remember, but I think I could get Nancy to come on. Yeah, I mean Angela to come on too. Okay. Anybody else want to comment before we end this? Very
hey guys,
good.
It's Donna.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Donna.
Since you guys were going through this whole topic of different things, have either one of you considered investing into the stars at all?
I bought 100 shares.
Yeah,
did you?
Actually,
yeah, I bought 100 shares, not because I think it's going to make any money, but I hope it does, but I wanted to support the organization.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking too.
Yeah, so that was why I did it.
Cool,
I just
thank you.
100 shares cost $500.
Yeah, it's not a lot. I saw it on their
Right.
website. So. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let me see. Definition of alien. Well, that's I'm not sure I want to go there. Alien to Earth, I suppose. Alien to being naturally born on Earth. Right. I'm not going to go there, Millie, but that's a good question. Okay.
Yeah, we know it. If we're really born here or not.
Yeah, we could. Okay, I'm going to end it here. Take care, everybody, and keep precogging. And I'm so glad that you were here to enjoy this with me. Take care. Bye bye.
Good, Marty. Thank you.
Right. Bye now.